Quranic commentary, this conflict, apparent conflict between the purpose of life to know and love God on the one hand and to worship God on the other, in Sunni commentary was resolved. Sunni Orthodox commentary maintained that the purpose of creation as worship of God on the one hand and knowledge of God on the other were not in fact contradictory. In the mainstream Sunni Quranic commentaries like Ibn Kathir, Qurtubi, Naysaburi, all include commentaries on the ayah, I only created jinn and humankind so that they could worship me. And among their comments are interpretations of to worship me as being to know me. Naysaburi, in fact, calls the interpretation of the purpose of creation as being to know God as being the viewpoint of the Ahl Sunnah. In addition, the Sunni Hadith scholars Mullah Ali Qari and Ajluni both asserted that Ibn Abbas, the Quran commentator par excellence among the first generation of Muslims, interpreted to worship me in the above mentioned ayah as to know me. On account of this and Ibn Abbas's impeccable reputation, Mullah Ali Qari stated that even though there was no known chain of transmission for the Hadith Qudsi, I was a hidden treasure and I loved that I be known, so I created creation in order to be known. Even though there was no known chain of transmission for this, its meaning was sound, according to Mullah Ali Qari. Hence, for Sunni Islam, even for non-Sufis, the understanding that worshiping God implied knowing God was permitted, and thus the purpose of creation could be seen as being to increase one's knowledge of God. For non-Sufis, and even for some Sufis, especially in the modern period, the fact that the purpose of creation was linked with the gaining of knowledge of God did not necessarily mean that it was during their lifetime that humans were to make a return journey toward greater knowledge of God. In fact, for non-Sufis, life could be seen only as a preparation for an increased knowledge of God. Beyond learning the Quran, the acquisition of hadith, and the study of fiqh, the increase in knowledge of God would only actually happen after death, according to some Sunni Muslims. This, in fact, is the way in which non-Sufi Quran commentaries such as Jalalain interpreted the ayah, Inna lillahi wa inna ilayhi raji'un. Indeed, we belong to God, to Him do we return. Namely, the return journey to God is prepared for while we are alive, but we only set out in the hereafter. Only after death can God be known directly. This non-Sufi dismissal of life as an opportunity in which humans could increase their experiential knowledge of God marked a clear distinction between non-Sufis and Sufis such as Baqli, whose writings are filled with spiritual journeying, sayr, way stations, maqamat, unveilings, mukashafat, and witnessings, mushahadat. Baqli is a classical example of a Sufi who does not believe that one must wait until death to glimpse his beloved. Al-Baqli, like many Sufis, asserted that the purpose of creation was God's love of being known. Baqli resolves the apparent contradiction between the Quranic expression of purpose of the creation as worship and the purpose of gaining knowledge by citing Ja'far as-Sadiq, radiyallahu anhu. As-Sadiq, going slightly beyond the thought of Ibn Abbas, glossed the verse, I only created humankind and jinn so that they could worship me. He glossed it as, so that they could know me and then worship me. Although one might be tempted to see this as a Shiite influence on Sufism, in fact, Baqli was transmitting the report from Sulami, who without any doubt was a Shafi'i Sunni, and who in addition was an important link in the hadith collections of Al-Bayhaqi. In addition, in spite of being the sixth Shiite Imam, Ja'far as-Sadiq is seen as being a pivotal figure in the early history of Sunni Sufism and is an important link in the Naqshbandi silsila. Elsewhere, Baqli states that the divine purpose behind creation, and thus the creation of individual selves, is to create beings who can have knowledge of obligations to God, huququllah, and to be receptive to love. Baqli expresses this in his commentary in the following Quranic verse. Ittaqullah, ittaqu rabbakum. Beware of your Lord, who has created you out of oneself, and out of it created its mate, and out of the two spread abroad a multitude of men and women. Baqli in his commentary states God wanted to originate creation so that creation could know divinity's claims on man, huququllah, and so that God could disseminate the lights of pre-eternal love in the vast expanse of hearts and the loci of spirits. And he states that the greatest human obligations to Allah Ta'ala, the greatest huququllah in turn, are knowledge of God, ma'rifah. The greatest human obligations to God are ma'rifah, knowledge of God, gratitude to God, shukr, and remembrance of God, dhikr. These are all our huquq that we owe God, all our obligations to God. Ma'rifah, shukr, and dhikr, according to Berkeley in his commentary. This knowledge that we are obligated to attain, this ma'rifah, according to Berkeley, is not simply the kind of knowledge that we understand when we ordinarily say, I know. Rather, it is being preoccupied with the awareness of God. It's preoccupation with the awareness of God is different than simply what we normally say when we say, I know. The crux of this knowledge of God, or ma'rifah, Berkeley defines as knowledge of Allah by means of Allah, not by anything other than Allah. Thus far, we've noted that for Berkeley, the purpose of creation is so that the self can, during its lifetime, make a return journey to directly know and love God. A second essential point to his thought is that this ma'rifah, this gnosis, is attained by regaining a lost awareness of the whole self. The whole self, for al-Berkeley, is the microcosm, or literally this substance of the undifferentiated whole, the Jawhar al-Basit. This microcosmic self, the cosmos in microform, in a human self, mirrors God, is the Mir'at al-Haq. It contains all forms, and in the process of creation became manifest just prior to the creation of individual forms. Berkeley, as did Tustari before him and Ibn Arabi after him, identifies this substance of the undifferentiated whole, this Jawhar al-Basit, the true self. He identifies it as the light of Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wasallam. Here, Berkeley cites the non-canonical hadith, and I quote, "The first of what God created was my light. Awwalu ma khalaqallah nuri." And he continues by saying that this true self, Berkeley continues, is the first Adam about whom Allah Ta'ala said, He created you out of one self. Moreover, this microcosmic self, this miniature of the cosmos, this Mir'at al-Haq that we in our